Hi, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Miriam Khan at Raise Your Vibes. Welcome to yet another podcast. Okay, this particular one is another retro podcast I did. I did it as a video podcast way back in 2020. Tune in and chillax. Maybe you'll learn something about resilience and determination, especially when things are stacked up against you. Enjoy, folks. I've been wanting to do this video for a very, very long time. And understandably, when life gets busy, shall we say busy, you're working, you're juggling things, I put it off. And during lockdown, during COVID-19, I decided that now's the time to really put certain video aspects, certain particular topics that I'm sure other people can relate to, or it can help them, guide them. I'm pretty out there because I'm sure there are other people that have had similar experiences, similar things that they can relate to. So this is going to be on my YouTube channel, Raise Your Vibes. This is all about helping other people in perhaps less fortunate circumstances, less fortunate situations. And it's about helping one another go through difficult times, difficult scenarios in our life. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is about dealing with resilience and dealing with determination, especially in very, very challenging and difficult situations. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background, a bit of a story about something that's happened in my personal life. And hopefully this particular situation can resonate with quite a lot of you that perhaps have gone through very hard and challenging situations in your life. Perhaps it gives you strength, perhaps it gives you some determination, perhaps it gives you some aspect of thinking, well, there's people out there that have had it slightly more challenging, slightly more harder. So here goes. Okay, so like I said, the topic is determination and resilience. So I'm from England, born and bred there. I lived in a city called Sheffield and had a great childhood growing up, very, very athletic, very tall for my age. I stood out in comparison to quite a lot of my male relatives because I was very tall for my age. Some of you might call it big boned, whatever, but there was always this tomboyish sort of like personality to me. And I couldn't help but get involved with some of my male cousins. Now, I'm from a Muslim background. So for a young girl in the 1980s, early 1980s, to be a tomboy, shall we say, is something that, you know, society sort of frowns upon, but I couldn't help it. It's something within my genes, something I couldn't help enjoying and liking. And I'm still like that to this day. There are still things that I love about that sort of aspect of my life. Now, I was into sports. I was into playing football, netball, basketball, cricket, loved cricket. I was into playing marbles, climbing trees, playing conkers. Like I said, these are stereotypical things that boys of that particular age, and especially my culture, when the girls should be, you know, in the kitchen helping mama, was doing. And it all changed one particular day when I was about 11 years old. Now, what happened was one particular day at school, I was in high school, one particular day at high school, I was in the gym lesson. Now, we had a huge gymnasium at school and we had to climb the horse, as we call it. So the horse, depending on where you are, is like a wooden box with different like levels. And what you do is you jump on like a little trampoline, jump onto like the horse and then jump off. This one particular day, for some reason, not sure why, and don't get me wrong, I'd always spent most of my time in and out of hospital with various sprains, various injuries, because I was athletic, and it's something that happens to kids, doesn't it? Where you hurt yourself, sprain yourself, whatever. Well, this particular day, I landed on this horse, fine. But when I jumped off the horse to land on the mat, didn't go as expected. Now, at the time, we thought, and my school thought, the school nurse thought, I twisted an ankle. My parents took me to the hospital. Same, you've got a twisted ankle, you need to rest, you need to do this. Unfortunately, I didn't get better. And this injury just wouldn't go away. Now, like I said, I was about the age of 11. Now, I continued to deteriorate for some time. And from basically struggling to walk, limping, this was over a good progress of a good couple of months that my health suddenly, like that, went. Okay? I found myself waking up some mornings in absolute agony. And the only way I could describe it, it was basically coming from my left hip joint. I couldn't explain to you what was happening. It's just that I knew I struggled to walk. So there were times when I would wake up in the morning, wake up at night in pain, absolute excruciating pain. And I couldn't tell you what it was. It was just unbearable pain that I felt. And as these months went on, obviously my parents were making sure I went to go and see medical doctors and making sure that somebody was trying to help me out to see what was wrong. Obviously they couldn't find anything. But the point was that during this time, this pain continued to the point where I would wake up some mornings and I could not get out of bed. I physically had to, I remember climbing out of my bed one morning, putting my hands down on like the carpet and pushing my body down the steps to go downstairs, obviously to the living room and say to mum and dad, something is not quite right. And, you know, understandably, this was a very, very difficult time for my family, for my siblings, for me. Something weird, something strange was happening to my body. Now, going back to our topic, you know, it was very, very hard to go to the hospitals. I saw various doctors and repeatedly. And I'm talking from a stretch from the age of 11 right up till I was 18, okay? I was told there's nothing wrong with you, okay? Now, you can imagine how painful that is to hear and how frustrating that is to hear. And these couple of things happened to me during that time, and I will never forget it because I had been a very quiet, very placid person, and suddenly my life had flipped from being very active to basically unable to do anything. I spent 2 years in and out of hospital. I spent most of that time in the hospital, from various tests to staying in the hospital. I had, you know, various x-rays, various tests, various blood tests, various, you know, procedures done, electric shock treatment on my leg. You name it, they just threw everything out at me. But the main thing was they kept saying, there's still nothing wrong, there's still nothing wrong. I knew clearly there was. And there was things that I had to come across that were extremely challenging, especially for a child of that age. And I think I matured very, very quickly, very quickly. I was always a sensible, mature child, being the eldest child. But I think this particular predicament anyway made me extremely more resilient and strong and determined. And I think in hindsight, probably made me very intrepid as well, and made me fearless and very passionate. And also nowadays, if I see some injustice or if I see something that needs changing, oh God, I will go about and do it. Going back to my scenario, some things that they did, you know, clearly when they test you, you know, in the hospital. So, for example, they check the movement of one leg with the other leg. They could tell something was clearly not right, but no tests, no, you know, nothing was showing up on x-rays or CAT scans or MRI scans, nothing. So you can imagine it's extremely frustrating, okay? One of the things that they did was they took tissue samples, they did biomedical analysis on the tissue samples, and found that there was nothing wrong. And one of the things that I found really, really insulting, but I can understand, really, really insulting prior to having this situation done, was, being seen by this shrink. Now, I'll never forget that particular scenario because my condition worsened at that time, and I was in the children's ward, and the hospital, refused to give me crutches at that time. They refused to give me any mode of moving around. I took the initiative to get some of the other children in the ward to get me one of the shower chairs. Now, you might think, why were you doing that? But the hospital just didn't have faith, didn't believe that there was something physically wrong with my body. And this was sort of proved on a day when this Asian, clinical psychologist came to see me. And I will never forget him approaching my bed and saying, I need to have a talk with you, and we need to have a little chat. And I remember him observing me meticulously as I got out of my bed and got myself onto this shower, cubicle chair. Now, the only way I can describe this shower cubicle chair is that it looks like a plastic chair. It's got wheels on. It's got some stability at the bottom to sort of like block it. But also, what doesn't go forward, there's nothing for you to push it. You have to go backwards with this particular chair. And he was watching me get out of bed. Okay, so again, I obviously pressed my hands down, pushed myself up, shuffled across, got myself into the chair, and off I went with him into this, room. He was observing me all the way through, and I felt observed. Obviously, I understood. I understood he had a job to do. But as we got into the little cubicle, he started his, what I will call, interrogation. And he began with, you seem to be able to move around very, very freely for someone who is, not able to walk. And my response was, well, what do you want me to do? I'm in this predicament. I'm in this particular situation. You have to modify. You have to adapt. You have to adjust. One day I was walking freely. I was running around. I loved running. I loved doing all the various things that a child of that age who is into her sports, who's athletically inclined, wants to, and suddenly it's gone. I'm not somebody who's going to sit there and lay still and just let this take over my life. So I continued answering him and challenging him back. And I'm sure maybe he thought as an adult I was being quite rude. Maybe he thought I was being obstinate. But if anything, I was making him realize that, I had to adapt. I had to change depending on my circumstances. Now, as this progressed and he continued having this conversation, it was clear to him and his agenda was that I was doing all of this to attention seek, and basically I wanted time with my father. So only years later, when I obviously studied psychology at college myself, I understood that he was looking at things from a Freudian concept. Boy, was he wrong. Not long after that, I was, told that I'm going to have some surgery to take some tissue samples away. They did 2 surgeries like this on my hip. I've still got the scars on my leg. One initially was about 4 or 5 centimeters long to take some tissue samples out. And then they did another surgery like that to just see, what is it that's going on. When they did the first operation, obviously the surgeons had a discussion with my father, and I was present, I was listening. And they said, once we had her under anaesthetic, one of the things that we did was to basically manipulate her leg and manipulate the movement in her leg to see if there was any reason as to why she was restricting her movements. There's obviously a certain limitation to her movement of her leg, but we thought it was psychosomatic. And we thought that perhaps she was making this up to get attention from you. And, I'm sat there thinking, what the hell? What are you on about? Why would somebody make this up? Why would someone, how could they even fake this? It's a severe thing to have to try and fake. Anyway, moving forward, and several more operations later, and we're talking, a long spell of time on traction. Their solution they didn't know what was wrong. They couldn't label it. They couldn't identify it. But their solution was, let's put some traction on her. Now, traction, oh my God, if you need your legs waxing and hair removing, I know how that feels now. Never again. Basically, traction was a process. I don't know if they'd still do it, but traction is a process where you have a very long, sticky bandage from the top of your thigh all the way down to the bottom of your feet and up again on the other leg. Same with both legs. You are bed bound, depending on the process. So for me, I had various cases of this for 6 weeks and then another 6 weeks and so on. And at the bottom, the sort of like plaster, I guess, is like also bandaged up so that it doesn't come off, it doesn't walk off. So you can imagine it's extremely uncomfortable. Then at the end of your bed and at the end of the bandage where your ankles are, there are some weights. Okay, and these hang off the actual bed. They're there for 6 weeks. Imagine that. Okay. The whole purpose or the whole point of that is to pull like your legs and your ligaments. And like I said, they didn't know what this was. They didn't know the situation of what it was. But this is what they thought they needed to do to improve the situation. I was given suggestions of basically, let's try and drill into the bottom part of your leg. And we can put some stabilizers in. We can screw some holes into your bone of your lower part of your legs, and you can wear special boots to help straighten the way you walk. And I was like, no, this has got nothing to do with the bottom part of my leg. It's the top part of my leg where I have issues. And there was a whole load of, dealing with very, very experienced doctors, don't get me wrong, but also doctors that just didn't have a clue what was going on with me, didn't have an understanding or an inkling of why this particular scenario was happening with me in my life and what was happening with my body. Now, this went on for a number of years. I would be out of the hospital when they needed the bed, and I wasn't classed as a severe case. So I would be out, then I'd be back in, out, back in, out, back in. This went on for a number of years. And I'd be off crutches, I'd be walking again. So obviously when you spend your time stuck in a bed on traction, it's very painful, very sore. You lose all muscle strength, you lose quite a lot of physical attributes in your leg that normally you would have. And it takes a lot to regain that strength and to be able to walk again. Now, in that time when I spent, going in and out of hospitals, some of the things that they tried as I got older, approaching age 15, 16, obviously I was walking either with a crutch or a walking stick, or one of the solutions they had was basically putting a wedge in my shoes for some reason, because it was clearly I was walking with a limp on one side. Sometimes it would be very minor, sometimes it would be very severe. You couldn't control it. As weird as it sounds, when the weather was really bad in England, it rained quite a lot, as you can imagine. Damp weather, cold weather, it would be hard, okay? So the situation would be that
I would really struggle to walk, and it'd be more painful as well. And the only way I can describe it to you is almost like it was grinding, something like this, grinding inside. And I was given as well option to have like these special boots made. I was like, no, this is all just like prosthetics in a way. Just deal with the issue of what was going on. They even did a situation where they were at a loss of what to do, so they were going to send me to Great Ormond Street, but my family refused to do that. Obviously, that's in London, far away. But they did have a huge selection of doctors instead that would come up and hold discussions, hold, deliberation as to what happened. Now, only when I got to the age of, I think, 17, 18, and I start to have some x-rays done then, because obviously you're having regular checkups with the orthopedic department. One x-ray showed something. Okay, now remember, this is a situation that has continued in my life from the age of 11. Up till then, nothing. No evidence. Finally, I was sat down and told, okay, we can see the problem. And the only thing I could say to you is it was almost like somebody went and shined a little torch and a ray of hope. And it was a relief. It was a huge relief to know that there was something. All this time, all this pain, all this constant, people accusing me of lying, of having a fake illness. It was finally over. There was hopefully going to be a solution. There was hopefully going to be some sort of recovery. There was going to be something that they could give me to sort this situation out. And what I was told by one of the orthopedic surgeons was that basically in my left leg, in the left hip, where you've got like the ball and socket joint. So imagine that's the socket joint there. And this is like the hip joint. The ball and socket joint sits like that normally. But in the middle, you've got obviously the cartilage and the tissue. What had happened was this part of the bone had eroded, gone. And it was basically grinding. And it was stuck in that position. So as I'd grown and as I'd developed and my body had changed, and obviously at the age of like 16, 17, 18, your body is still changing and growing, it had got stuck in that position, okay? And I was just relieved. That there was now this, predicament that I'm going to be in. And the solution was eventually to have a hip replacement. Now, again, I faced quite a lot of obstacles to get that done, quite a lot of backlash to get that done. Most of that was coming from my family and from people that thought that, no, this is not the right solution. This is not the best solution for religious reasons, for personal reasons, for culture reasons, for tradition reasons. I was then at the age of like 18. And for the first time in my life, I really used my voice and I used it to the best way that I could. I do not regret that decision at all, because being the youngest person at that time to have that surgery done was a huge step. And I was told there's two choices that you've got. Either you're going to end up back in a wheelchair or you're going to be able to walk. And I remember looking at this doctor sternly and saying, well, I've been there, done that bit, been in a wheelchair. What's the worst it could be? But if you could give me the chance to walk again, with this ability to have this freedom again, brilliant, bring it on. And when I was about 20, I think, I had that surgery during the first sort of like summer period of my holidays from university. So you can imagine, you're supposed to be resting, you're supposed to be catching up on assignments, reading ahead for the following year. No, I was spending my time recuperating from major surgery. And the only way I can describe that pain from waking up from that surgery was like being shot. Not that I know what it's like to be shot, Now, it took a long time to recuperate. It took a long time to rebuild my strength in my legs and my muscles. And, since that time, I've had another hip replacement. I've had two. Quite possibly I'm due a third one because of my age. I'm 42 soon. And understandably, you wear it out. The first one I had done was meant to last 25 years. It didn't last that long. But I was a guinea pig at the time. They said, that doing this particular surgery on me was going to help quite a lot of people. And years into the future, you see people coming from wars, and you see how technology has advanced and how they are able to, reproduce limbs and reproduce hip surgeries. One of the biggest challenges I had was trying to convince these doctors to give me that one chance, because the minimum age was 60, and I'm 20 at this age. And I'd suffered enough. And if it wasn't for my resilience, it wasn't for my stubbornness, if it wasn't for me not giving up on myself and just saying, no, this is not good enough. This is not good enough, I would never be in the position I am now. Now, I appreciate that's a long-winded story, long-winded background, but it needs to be clear, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have done half the stuff that I've continued to do in my life. I haven't given up from challenges. I've cruised on. I haven't given up from being intrepid. I haven't sat back and let life escape me. If anything, I've gone out to seek it. And the reason I'm saying this personal story to you is that there are going to be some of you out there that do feel doom and gloom, that do feel sad, that do feel pessimistic, that do struggle, that do find, black holes where there's supposed to be light. And all I'm saying to you is, through my particular story, never give up. Be determined. Be optimistic. Be intrepid. Be that person that fights, that fights to keep going forward. No matter the predicament, no matter the situation, you've got this. You've got this. That's all for now. Take care. Stay strong. Remember to be resilient. Remember to be a fighter. Stay strong.
I'm sure many of you found that podcast enlightening and hopefully inspirational. If I can be of any assistance, you know where to find me via Raise Your Vibes on Instagram. All my best to anyone who's suffering out there, anyone who's struggling out there. The world can be hard, the world can be difficult, but we have to try and, show that resilience, as I've said. Much love. Thanks very much for tuning in. This has been your host, Miriam Khan at Raise Your Vibes.